thank you everybody for coming in this morning to participate in this conference, and thanks to all the panelists who agreed to join us today. Looking forward to a very, very intellectually stimulating and interesting conference today, and looking forward to a spirited discussion on outlook for online payments in India. I wanted to start off by just asking each of the panelists to provide just a bit of background about themselves and their firms, and also the extent to which their firms are focused on online payments.
Thank you, Nitin. I'm Sohini from Axis Bank, and Axis, as you must all be aware, is the third largest private sector bank. We just completed our 20 years and recently declared our profits. It's really fresh. We are $1 billion in profits. And electronic banking group is what I head at Axis. So clearly it's a key focus area for us. In fact, we are trying to look across all the spaces and trying to see what we can do outside of branches and outside of person-to-person interaction, and how do we drive banking and move it beyond people and beyond branches. So a lot of initiatives. In fact, the one that comes to my mind, top of my mind in terms of what we're doing is our award-winning mobile banking app, which is seeing the kind of traction which is actually taking us by surprise. So we do believe that transactions on just our app are going to overtake transactions maybe even on our debit cards, something which we have focused for a really long time. So, so yes, electronic banking and digital business is a key focus area for us, lots of initiatives. Maybe we'll talk about some of them during the discussion.
No, absolutely.
Pulak Sinha from State Bank of India. I look after the payment solution area in the bank. And it is not, it said that is the largest bank in the country. While still having, I think largest in all aspects, we're having more than 50,000 ATMs. We're having the internet customers of more than 2 crore now. So debit cards also have crossed, it will be almost 38 million. So sorry, 380 million, sorry, 38 crore. So the big bank and the number also big, but the question is, we're driving more from the perspective of the common person, common customer, and in that way we have started our green channel counter in the branch itself. There's a pause at the branch, which has helped the customer to do their transaction very fast. As compared to the normal transaction of 3 to 4 minutes, it takes less than a minute. And to take care of our growing need of this non-home customers, we have started one green debit card. That is just a hard-coded card. It is linking to one account at the other end, and the money is flowing instantly, real time. Other things are obviously mobile banking. We're having a good growth. The customer base is more than 1 crore. And the transaction happening, fund-based transaction is more than around 1.5 lakhs a day. Pure fund-based transaction. So apart from that, we're having kiosk banking. Recently, we have started our SBI ePay. There is an aggregator business in the banking space for the first time. That is also where we have onboarded around 20 banks so far. And we're thinking, we're getting a big picture from there. It will happen, and we'll try to move more and more in the business space.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Sridhar. I run digital and innovation for Citi. Very broadly, I think my team and I have a scope which covers essentially 3 areas. First is to increase digital engagement of our customers. And what I mean by that is to get more of our customers to use electronic channels, digital and mobile. So customers who are not using them, get them to use. Customers who are using them, get them to use them more. Customers who are using them for one activity, get them to use it for many activities. So increasing digital engagements and creating infrastructure that will help our customers use digital as a channel for service and interaction. The second is to grow customer franchise through the online channels. Acquire new-to-bank customers, cross-sell to existing customers, upsell products. So the entire sales and marketing element of digital is the second area that we look at. And the third is payments, and our ambition is to dominate payments. And when I say payments, I mean e-commerce on the one side, where customers can transact on third-party websites, but also on person-to-person, person-to-many, person-to-enterprise, those sort of payments that we would like to engage in, grow, and scale up. And the underlying theme along all these three areas is innovation, constantly looking for ideas and new methods which will add value to our customers and therefore add value to the bank. So in essence, that is the broad definition of what my team and I do. To give you some idea of where digital is in Citi's landscape, it's very much center of plate. Most of our transactions are digital. Our customer base is extremely digitally savvy, and we'd like more and more of that to happen. So it is a very key part of our business and something that is growing. In fact, there are three big trends that happen in the world. There is globalization, there is digitization, and finally urbanization. So you can see that digital is very much center of plate.
Hi everyone, I'm Satyen with Citrus Payments, one of the founders of the company. Citrus is a complete online payments company around solutions around online payments. The way we look at the world is very simple. We look at what users want, and then we figure out what we need to build for that around payments. We are about 3 years old. We've spent time to build all the assets, underlying assets, to facilitate all kinds of payments. All of this is to enable our problem-solving approach around users, whether they are businesses, whether they are individual customers. It's a very straightforward approach. We are not religious about what we do at the back end, whether it's somebody's wallet, whether it's a credit card, whether it's IMPS. We just say, is it really solving the problem? That's how we look at the world.
Hi, I'm Vasu from Billdesk. Billdesk is a 14-year-old company. And hopefully one day we'll have a resume as impressive as the three banks here, $1 billion profit, 38 crore customers.
Patience.
Most, yes.
Patience.
But till then, the only thing I can proudly say is all our transactions are digital electronic. And that is hopefully something all the banks are aspiring to get to. We are a neutral platform, which is to say that the only focus we have is how do you process transactions electronically. If consumers want them to be online, we do it online. If consumers want them to be processed in a batch mode, we do it in a batch mode. The distinguishing factor is we don't directly target retail customers ourselves. We work with partner banks and partner merchants and billers. So the customer stays a customer of the respective entity, and we just help them go electronic.
Thank you. Now, so you've seen from the panel here, we have representatives from 3 banks, and we have representatives from 2 payment services companies. So for each of the questions I ask, and for the questions that the audience poses to us, I'll ask a representative from each group to share their thoughts. And I wanted to start off by just looking at the landscape of users. You have consumers, you have enterprises, you have SMEs. Be very curious to hear from both parties, where are we seeing the most traction in online payments today? Where's the opportunity? Where do we think that consumers across each of those channels are most sophisticated, and where is there still ways to go? So why don't I start off by asking Sohini to provide her thoughts on what the banks are seeing from a relative sophistication and relative opportunity across each of those segments.
Thanks, Nitin. So I guess we are seeing the maximum traction in the consumer segment, and I'm aware, even as I say that, because we were discussing this just before we walked onto the panel, that there is divergence of opinion here. But I think within the consumer space, there is it's a really vast landscape. So if we look at customers like Citibanks, for example, I think that's a different set of customers. And if we are talking about the customer who is the target profile for an Airtel Money, that's a different set of customers. And clearly there's loads of difference in what's going on at the front end as well as at the back end there. But even for customers, if we move away and move from both ends of the spectrum and talk about, say, Mr. Sinha's customers or our customers and the mass public there, I guess there's a lot of forward movement. We are seeing adoption from the customers, which I guess it's not like banks are proposing something and then trying to get customers to adopt. I guess there's a lot of customer adoption, and banks are trying to keep pace with what the customers are demanding next, at least in the consumer space. And many of the services, I would say, in fact, even something like bill pay or recharges are obviously all out there and very common. But even if you look at simple things like SMS banking, or you look at USSD based services, which are really limited, for a number of reasons, and obviously we don't want to go into them right now. But even without banks publicly promoting them, you would realize that there's offtake happening, because customers just, they just stumble upon them, and then it's just so convenient that they would get it. So I would think that consumers is the fastest growing space, and there's a lot of catch-up banks are doing, so you have to really be ahead of your
And
time
on the
there.
consumer side, it sounds like you're pointing to 3 specific areas. One would be online recharge, bill pay, which is sort of consumers vis-a-vis service providers. The second would be banking services, consumers vis-a-vis their banks. And the third would be any Airtel money you mentioned, which would be peer-to-peer, consumers vis-a-vis each other. And you're seeing different types of progress across each of those areas.
Each of those, yeah, absolutely. And that's only looking at transactions, which of course is the focus here. But if you go to what Sridhar mentioned about even customer acquisition, we're seeing interesting developments there. So, even for products which are typically push products, like there are models that we have in the country for selling things like insurance and credit cards, which are very, very push based. We would love them to be need based, but everyone knows that's not the way it works. You find that there's a difference when you're trying to just offer it to the customer digitally. So there's a lot happening on the consumer space. On the other two, which is enterprise and SME, my take is that I guess there's a lot of opportunity in the SME space, but it is taking both sides, banks to come up with solutions and for the SMEs to really move beyond the mindset that they have been operating in, which is a cash intensive kind of mindset. So I guess that's the space which I would put in the opportunity bucket, but where is the maximum action happening is consumer.
For either Pulak or Sridhar, are you seeing any interesting use cases, scalable use cases on the enterprise or the SME side that's worth mentioning? I mean, we were discussing earlier in the huddle about NEFT and RTGS, which has been around for quite a while, and you're seeing a lot of traction. Any other examples or interesting areas?
So I would like to add 2 or 3 more things like that. If I look into the corporate internet banking, the usage and the number of customers onboarding in that is a huge increase in the last 2 years. So that itself says that the SMEs are also onboarding the payment space. And moreover, what is happening, we are having a large base of SME customers. What we are trying to do, that is our portal is already on with the SME, they can do so many things there, but what we are going to do the B2B, like that some SMEs are doing some raw material for the other SME. So they will be visiting that site and they will be, negotiating and doing the business that way. There is a big thing going to happen. And most essentially what I will tell that about the consumer space, this country is like still having both. Volvo is also there, Bullock is also there. So if I compare the city like the Mumbai as in a remote area in any place, and the need for that place is obviously the remittance. There are villages, the villagers has to visit at least 10 kilometers to take the test of ATM. The question is, it is increasing and it is increasing day by day, but that it will take its own time, and it is going from this geography to another geography, from the metros to urban to semi-urban, rural, this is the way it is flowing, and it will take its own time.
Yeah, but I think one interesting trend will help accelerate this entire growth, both in consumer and SME, and maybe try and converge the needs. For example, if you look at the e-commerce merchants. Now, on the one hand, you could say that they service retail customers and they have a website that caters to individual retail customers. But on the other side, they also are SME customers to banks. So they have cash management needs, they have Forex needs, they have corporate card needs. So their needs is also very typically SME needs, and they need to be fulfilled digitally. So banks will be compelled to use this as a test case or use this as an approach by which they can create digital infrastructure for other SMEs who may or may not be at that stage currently. So this entire convergence of online e-commerce and online-based businesses and getting them to get the best service out of digital will then sort of expand to other areas within SME.
You mentioned one of Citrus's goals is to understand what consumer needs are and then work with merchants and businesses to adapt to those needs. So what are your experiences on the SME and corporate side?
So I think this is reflective. The difference in opinion of how we see consumer adoption and how the banks are seeing it is reflective of the culture we have here. There's an inherent trust in banks that consumers have. So your engagement level as a consumer with a bank is much higher. And it's going to keep growing. What we're seeing is that when you try and approach a consumer directly and try and change or influence their behavior to actually create a disruption in their cash or physical habits to digital habits, it's a much harder problem when you're a private player. On the flip side, we are seeing a lot of interest from enterprises and SMEs to go in and digitize everything. Large enterprises coming to us saying, how can we do better invoicing, collections? 1,000 crore companies. It's a very different matter that they don't want to pay much for that, so we don't know what the business model is. Yeah.
Patience.
Exactly. But then in the SME segment, right, if you see examples globally of what Dwola is doing or what Stripe is doing, that's appealing to the small merchant segment that you're talking about. And these guys are going gangbusters. The number of businesses coming online, the number of entrepreneurs coming online is tremendous. It's probably doubled in the last, I would say, 6 months for us as a general traffic. And this is, I think, the next step which is going to grab consumers and make them trust that there's something of value to trust private enterprises and not just their banks.
Great. I wanted to shift the discussion towards mobile, which is a phenomenon that sort of we're all aware of, but I'm sure many of us have seen transaction growth over the last year or two just really be phenomenal. And the question that I would ask would be, as online payments transitions to mobile payments, is it a question of repurposing online for mobile, or do we have to think about mobile differently? I thought I'd ask Sridhar this question because you had mentioned that you're spending a lot of time focusing on mobile. How have you approached the mobile sort of issue, compared to how you've approached the online issue?
Okay, that's a great question. And to step back a little bit to the start of how when online started, late 90s, maybe 2000, when online started, we started we'll replicate physical behavior on the online store. So started off with books and cassettes in those days, and then it gradually went ahead. When mobile banking came about, sometime early 2000, maybe mid 2000s, we said what customers do in the online space, they will tend to do in the mobile area as well. So if they're logging in, they're doing all non-financial transactions, paying bills and all that, we should replicate all those transactions on the mobile platform. But there are some key features of mobile which are very unique to that channel, and therefore those need to be exploited. Just to give you an example, one is that mobile is location-based. You carry your mobile all the time, and therefore services that lend themselves to this location-based activity should very much be a part of the mobile offering, which may or may not be a part of online. So location-based services, I know that we're still struggling with GPS location and so on, but these things will become a part of the mobile offering as we go along. The second advantage that is very intuitive and very simple, but it took us a while to figure out, is that customers use mobile not because they have it all the time. It's also that much simpler. I just wake up, I click on that mobile app icon, and then I've logged in, rather than waiting to boot my PC and then wait for it and then log in and do all sorts of things. So it is like just opening a tab. And that sort of convenience, again, needs to be exploited. So transactions that require very quick decision making, or transactions that require quick research, quick information, that is sort of lends itself to mobile, and that needs to be exploited. So my sort of summary would be that mobile should be all of online a bit more, and in some cases the details of online may or may not be relevant to the mobile channel.
Vasu, given that Billdesk has been around for 14 years, you've probably witnessed firsthand both the emergence and adoption of online, but also the transition from online to mobile. So what has been your experience with respect to how to think about mobile versus online?
Whether it's mobile or online bit, it's basically a question of behavioral change. And that is predicated on two things. Do consumers feel there is a need for it, and is there value in it for them? If those two primary objectives are met, the change happens. Just distinguishing again between banking services and payments. Banking services, there's a lot more than just payments. Consumers can use a mobile interface to access a variety of banking services, but not necessarily conclude it to a payment. So therefore, mobile, when just looked at from a payments perspective, has one other angle to be factored in, which is the way the banking environment or the regulatory environment wants those transactions to happen. And that plays a great role in terms of how the experience of a consumer in mobile is. But at a broad level, I think there is greater traction in people using mobile for information services and even to an extent shopping. Payments are still dominant currently in the online, in the PC-based online world, as I talk of it. Mobile is yet on the periphery when you talk of it as third-party payments. Respective banks seeing their own payments, that can be high because it's almost like what you would call within their own networks. It's easy to get a consumer who's using a banking app to do a payment that stays within that loop. The moment you kind of go out of it, you integrate multiple other things, complexity comes in. Having said that, is there a trend towards that change? Yes, there is. One last point is to distinguish between using the mobile as a device to access a service and make a payment, which is to say you're using a smaller screen device as opposed to a PC to make a payment, versus using truly the mobile as a device in a manner different from the regular PC. I don't think we've reached that second stage yet.
That's fair. Yeah, please.
I think the mobile world is a completely different beast. It's not even comparable to a PC, whether it's about benefits of it, whether it's always on or no. I think mobile devices are an extension of yourself. It's always with you, your identity is stored there, it's something you trust. That's where you have all your communications open without passwords, you have your Facebook open, your Twitter open, anything else is locked if it's on a desktop. And I think this is going to be a fundamental shift in how people think and behave, where payments, transactions, banking services become contextual, as you were saying, not just based on location, but based on what you're interacting with. So how can, as a user, you're not going to start distinguishing and saying, I'm doing action A here, but I need to go to my bank app to do action B. You expect them to be intertwined. And I don't think we've even seen the start of it. If you think about it, 2007, there was zero mobile payments happening. Today, there are over 2 billion users buying when you just count the App Store and the Play Store. That's crazy. Apple's supposed to have 800 million cards on file. Every app purchase, every in-app purchase is a mobile payment. It's already happened. I don't think it's a debate anymore.
And plus, in India, it may be generational as well, that for certain audiences, there's a familiarity with online and they have to be handheld to mobile. But for certain audiences, if you were to look over the next 5 years or so, they may be only familiar with mobile. So I received one question for the audience that I think is interesting, and it also ties into one of the points Vasu made is consumers need to sort of understand what's in it for them in order for them to sort of migrate online. And the question that was asked was, you have electronic payments options for e-commerce purchases, but you still see such a large prevalence for cash on delivery. So if you were to simply look at this particular use case for online payments and mobile payments, what can be done to maybe strengthen consumer adoption when it comes specifically to cases regarding e-commerce? Maybe we may say that actually there's very little that can be done, or maybe we have a different view.
Actually, a lot can be done, and a lot is, I mean, maybe not a lot, but quite a bit is being done to get this cash on delivery piece to move into card payment. Now, first of all, let's split this cash on delivery piece. The cash on delivery piece is, people say it's 50% of total. It is predominantly in the e-tailing area. So if you look at ticket booking, for example, the cash on delivery component is quite small, about 10 to 15% is cash on delivery. So there are quite a few factors that affect why, why do people prefer cash on delivery to other modes. One, this touch and feel, so which is again very much part of the e-tailing landscape. Second is the abundance of cash that we have, and that needs to find a route, and therefore cash on delivery. So things like mobile POS, which have been deployed by a few banks, including our bank, which is getting traction amongst customers. So the ability to go to the customer's doorstep, take that POS machine, which is hooked onto a mobile, and do a card transaction, where customers can touch and feel the product, and then despite that pay by cash is one option. The second option is to sort of reassure the customer that even if the customer wasn't able to like the product, then it's all right for him to return it. So it's not as if he pays by card, he's stuck with the product. So the return policy is strong, and if there is an assurance that he would not be saddled with something that he doesn't like, then that again would help. So there is inherent affinity for cash within our ecosystem, and that will remain. But there are ways in which that can be sort of reduced or over a long period of time, maybe minimized.
I can add to that. As a matter of fact, I take it a different way. This is basically the reason for the ecosystem is not developed that way. That is the main reason for this cash on delivery. What is happening, now only we are talking about mobile POS or all this thing. There is even the NFC technology, which is in the nascent stage. Then which way the person will pay? Obviously the cash is the only way out. Wherever the person, and then another factor comes in, obviously the security part of it. If you see any technological product, the first thing is obviously the awareness. If I know that there is a system to pay, there is a way to pay otherwise. The second one is convenience. If it is convenient, I can pay. The third one is obviously if I am secured, then I will pay. In this case, what is happening, as I was telling a few minutes back, even today the news business line takes one article today that the cash is still the king. That it says that it is around 12,500 billion rupees is in rotation in a particular year. So the question is that it will take its own time to come up to that level, but I am visualizing it that particularly with the mobile POS, the things will be little much better quickly.
Just add one more nuance to that. I guess the important thing is for us to, again, not use the broad brush and see where are customers actually comfortable paying with their cards and parting with the card details or using any other electronic form. And within the e-commerce spectre, you would find that surprisingly for high value or high ticket size, customers are very comfortable with doing electronic transactions. For example, air tickets or insurance payments, which are really large ticket size payments. There is mass adoption of movement to electronic. I don't have the figures, but I'm sure even LIC would be witnessing a shift in payments to electronic, with customers being absolutely comfortable with that. But when it comes to, say, ordering your groceries, you're still not comfortable. So I guess there's also the trust that we have to ensure the consumer has in the party that they're paying to. And we had this era of fly-by-night operators. I know of late, obviously, the e-tailers are also becoming stronger, more focused. They're there. There's investments in them which will ensure that they weather the storm. So I guess once there are established names, it will be easier for consumers to trust. So one should not, it's not just about whether the technology exists, but whether the consumer trusts. And how is he able to trust for high ticket size items, but not for low ticket size? I think that's something for us to think about.
I think it comes to the carrot and stick approach, right? If you want to encourage behavior, you want to promote it. We know all e-tailers typically spend more on cash on delivery, and yet your prices are the same whether you pay by card or COD. Why should that be the case? Give a user a discount, maybe he'll start moving his behavior over, and that benefits you, benefits the user. The regulators could do the same thing, right? In the retail environment, if you pay with cards, etc., give them an incentive. In some form. It doesn't always have to be monetary, but it could be some other forms of incentive. And I think it's that belief in in what value you as a merchant is creating also. Amazon, when they launched, they didn't have COD. Now, they still don't have COD for many of the categories that they serve. But I think it's the confidence in their catalog and their pricing and their ability to deliver which says it's okay. So what if the whole market and Flipkart gives COD for everything? We don't need to. And I think we are seeing tremendous success from that confidence in their abilities to deliver.
There was a question asked by two of the people here. Heartbleed from the security standpoint, and there was a second question that was asked about Square-type mobile POS initiatives. Because we're running short on time, I'll just let anybody who wants to answer either one of those questions. Implications of Heartbleed. And what do you think about mobile POS, Square-type devices? Anybody from the banks want to take either of those?
Yeah, I'll take the mobile POS one, given that we've launched it and we're pretty close to it. The mobile POS piece, we launched it about 2.5 years ago now, and it's especially become very popular among e-tailers who have physical distribution of goods, and that's growing. The EMV migration sort of created a sort of hiccup in the implementation, because the POS device also had to be configured to take in the EMV, but that's behind us now, and we're going ahead with the launch. There are cleverer ways to do this. Apart from having this device that is hooked onto the mobile, there will be mobile apps that will come in, which will solve the problem for e-tailers in the sense that they wouldn't need to buy a new gadget that will need to be hooked on. So there will be developments in the area, and cash and delivery. If you look at the e-commerce market today, it's about 14 billion, of which cash and delivery is overall about 15 to 20%. And in the e-tail segment is as high as about 50 to 60%. So banks as well as the e-commerce merchants are very keen to get a solution for cash and delivery. Solutions like mobile POS, Square, mobile apps that will get rid of cash and delivery will come into play. And as we go along, we will see that there will be a reduction in the percentage of cash and delivery.
I'll just add to the mobile POS, and it depends on who asks the question. I mean, Sridhar's answered from the banking perspective. If it's an entrepreneur who asks the question with a view to saying, should I start a mobile POS business and start manufacturing a device? Answer is definitely no. And if somebody is already halfway down the path and wants to know what to do, then it's a function of rethink your business model. Because there are a couple of angles there. There's a device angle, there is a merchant acquisition angle, there's a customer service model, and what your whole business model is. There can be multiple opinions, but in my personal view, it's a game for the banks to win. So from just an entrepreneur's perspective, if you're just into the device manufacturing saying, can I create an MPOS and win this business? In the short run, you can help banks accelerate their play into that space, but there are big boys of devices who will come in at a lower cost. So if you're in the business, think a merchant side business rather than the device side.
Okay, and since you mentioned banks, I can't resist but respond to that.
Excellent.
Yeah. So actually, if I can add another angle, of course, mobile POS is exciting, and at Axis, we've actually invested heavily into that business. The key thing from a market dynamics, or again, leave the bank or the mobile POS manufacturing entrepreneur here, but look at the merchant who this is supposed to service or serve. The merchant is, unless the economics of that entire transaction or business changes, nothing much is going to change. I do believe mobile POS, the way we are running it in the country at this point, is just a more sophisticated GPRS terminal which is available at a lower cost, because nothing else in the transaction economics is changing, except that now instead of that big bulky thing, you can carry something smarter. But the underlying economics of it, unless that changes, unless a merchant is willing to pay more for it and actually incentivize, like Satyen mentioned earlier, that can we incentivize, why can't the merchant incentivize a card transaction instead of a cash transaction? Unless that changes and he's willing to pay, it's really a game of, you know, everyone's trying to figure out, you said, obviously
this
the
is a great
entrepreneur
question.
is not making money, but really
Everybody
who
pick
is?
up their mics.
I know.
This is great.
But
like
who
this.
is a question which we should figure out, maybe offline. I don't know if we should do it here, but.
In 5 seconds, I completely agree with what Sohini said. To add further to it, as she said, it's just an extension today in the sense of a GPRS device. Yeah. But one step back, the entire POS business itself is an extension of banking business today, including the pricing of POS business. So you're kind of going back to saying that's why I said it's essentially a banking game in the short run. So.
Yeah. And if you have a funnel like a bank to acquire merchants, etc., it makes sense what Vasu is saying, right? If you don't, guys, you're trying to sell a bulky device to people who have a supercomputer in their pockets already, right? Figure out how to build for that future, as opposed to saying this fat thing with the roll of paper inside, everything. You ask any person who is born after 1995 and you show them a POS machine, they don't understand what that device does or why it even exists.
Just 2 seconds. I think the concept is great and it'll work. We shouldn't sort of confuse the concept with the current device. The device will transform, right? The device will transform. There'll be cheaper, better ways to do it. So, but this will go on, and this is the way it will be.
I endorse the views. The only thing I'll say is one is cost, and second one is very important is that the complaints has come down. That is very clear.
Well, I'd like to thank all of the panelists here today for sharing their thoughts and kickstarting the conference today. And I hope all of the participants today enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you, everyone.